What's happening, Failroaders? I'm Joshua Thomas, and I am here to talk to you about Final Fantasy XVI. This is my definitive review of the entire game, and my explanation as to why it didn't get the GOTY, the Game of the Year award. It is an absolutely fantastic game, and it's definitely deserving of some praise, but it also fell short in a few crucial areas, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, let's talk about the good stuff, what we liked about this game, or at least what I liked. Remember, this is my review, and if you feel different about it, that's okay. So the first thing that I think was really great about Final Fantasy XVI was the mature story. This was the first numbered Final Fantasy game with a mature rating, and it definitely showed. There were themes present in this game that, while they may have been present in other games, were certainly depicted in a more mature manner. Being willing to be a little bit more sexual, show a little bit more skin, and also show a lot of blood. Even some decapitations here and there. They took influence from Game of Thrones, and it definitely shows, and I actually really enjoyed getting to see this different take on a Final Fantasy story. And I've got to say that the story overall as well was just well done. I really enjoyed it, and going on with that, the characters were really good. The voice actors are really what sold these characters the most. The voice actors did an incredible job bringing these characters to life, because in this game, I feel like in certain areas, their animations and the camera direction wasn't the greatest, and so their facial animations also felt a little plastic, but it's those voice actors who really brought the life into these characters, and so I can't applaud them enough. It's particularly Benedicta's voice actress. Man, she did an outstanding job.
Come, little lamb, to the slaughter with you.
And I think overall it was her and possibly Sid who were my favorite voice actors in the Final Fantasy XVI game. Another thing going into sort of the story was the support of the story, or the world building. They definitely built a very interesting world in which people who were naturally magic bearers were enslaved, and it kind of made you wonder, man, what led to this such a divide in this population of magic users are slaves and even subhuman to some people. The world that we encountered and went through, and even some of the side quests, really helped to hone this and broaden this and show us the different dichotomies of these different regions and countries, and how they treated slaves, and how they treated their royalty, and also how they treated their dominance as well. Some viewed dominance as abominations, while others praised them and held them on high and gave them their own castles, so to speak. And then there's Sid. This is quite possibly one of the... Actually, no. Sid Telemann is the best Sid in any Final Fantasy franchise that I've ever seen. I'm not changing that. Not even Sid from Final Fantasy VII beats Sid Telemann. He was just such a great character. He was, Clive's antagonist. He was like Clive's teacher in the beginning of the game. And honestly, when he was taken away from us too soon, there was really no replacing him.
Alright, Clive. Still busy saving the world?
Nope, no one replaced him whatsoever. And we definitely felt that void throughout the rest of the game. Unfortunately, feeling that void also meant that, well, it was a little detrimental to the storyline, but we'll get into that later. The combat system also has to be talked about here. The combat system was solid, though it was lacking. It definitely felt smooth, and it was definitely a reflex-based combat system in which you really had to look at your enemy's movements and attacks and figure out the best method of dodging it, and then when you could use your abilities to counter them. And then, of course, quite possibly the biggest show in Final Fantasy XVI were the icon battles. These were giant colossi fighting each other, and when these colossi fought, the world knew. Well, in some cases the world knew, and in other cases they could, be heard from miles around, no doubt. And it was definitely some of the most grandiose fighting that I've ever seen in a Final Fantasy game. And I've got to say that it felt really good to know that we were in control of one of these characters who was making such a huge impact on this world of Valisthea. The only bad thing about this was that by the end of the game, I was left really wanting to be able to control more than just Ifrit or just Phoenix or the two of them combined. Even though it was still fun, I wanted to play as Bahamut. I wanted to play as Shiva, let me branch out a little bit. Nevertheless, I hope that they do stuff similar to this in other Final Fantasy games where we get to have this giant, colossal fight. The music was there, and for me personally, the music was really good, but it wasn't just like fantastic. I wasn't walking around humming it, all over the place like I do for Final Fantasy VII, but I still really enjoyed it in some areas. But in others, it kind of just like faded into the background and felt like generic video game music. Now it's time to talk about the things that I felt this game was lacking, and these are the reasons why the game just wasn't Game of the Year material, even though it was nominated, and it certainly deserved the nominee. The big thing with combat, we'll just start off with combat here, was that there was no elemental weaknesses. This can't be overlooked, that I think this might be the very first numbered Final Fantasy to not have elemental weaknesses. And so when, at the beginning of the game, it was like, hey, the different icons you have allow you to change the magic that you fire. And it doesn't matter. It's, instead of you firing fire magic or ice magic or wind magic, you're just firing red magic or blue magic or green magic. It makes no difference whatsoever to your fighting style which kind of magic you were casting. Also, when you're fighting this giant fire demon and you're shooting it with fire to hurt it, and then you're using fire abilities to do even more damage to it, it just felt weird. I mean, even a game like God of War has elemental weaknesses and forces you to, learn them and need to use them. And I know what some of you are thinking, but Josh, we didn't have access to like over half of the elements for half of the game, and while the storyline was a very good reason as to why we didn't have access to them, we still had party members who made up for some of that. In the beginning of the game, we had 4 elements in our party. We had fire, we had ice, we had lightning, and then after we defeated Garuda, or Benedicta, we got wind. We had 4 elements there, and this is another issue I have. Our party members felt like they really didn't do much. It almost felt like they were just there for show. I mean, I saw them doing things, and I saw them doing damage, but I didn't see any numbers popping up on the screen for them. Torgal almost felt useless in many situations, especially in boss battles. I just was like, man, I guess I'll spam Torgal, but maybe he'll add up to an extra few hundred damage when I'm over here doing 20,000 damage or even higher towards the end of the game. So even something as small as being able to understand the abilities that our party members were using, like there were spells being casted on me, like as Clive, and I didn't even know what those spells were doing to me. I was like, well, maybe it's giving me a barrier or something? I don't know. There's nothing to indicate one way or the other, and there was no little, hey, these are Joshua's abilities. Hey, these are Cid's abilities. Didn't know anything. And if there were, then, the game simply just didn't tell you. So it didn't tell you, hey, look, you can learn about Cid's abilities right here, or or Jill's abilities. So those were two really big issues, and I think that the game would have been made so much more fun if elemental weaknesses existed. And there's no defending the counter argument to, oh, we didn't need it. Nah, I felt it. It was missed. The other thing, and I think this is glaring for a lot of people, were that it had some bad side quests.
Fuck! He's seen us.
Now, in the beginning, I joked in my playthrough, which you can also view on the FailroadExpress, that, we're playing Waiter Simulator. We're going around and giving people food and then listening to what they have to say. And in certain situations, these really dull side quests were good in that they gave a little bit of world building, and I didn't mind that. And they were also really short, and I didn't mind that either. And then when we got to Senbrek, there were some really good side quests, and I'm glad I did them because it showed how horribly bearers were treated in this region. That they were treated as subhuman playthings for children. They were sent to their death for entertainment, and it was sad and just, it was just made your stomach sick to see people being treated this way, just like items that could be discarded. But these side quests were overshadowed by far too many side quests that were just go here, kill the enemy, get useless loot that you really didn't need. And it just didn't add enough to the world building, or it didn't tie into the main story enough, so much to the point that by the time we did get to better side quests towards the end of the game, I actively didn't want to play them. I had no desire to play them, and I forced myself to do that, and I'm glad I did, but I still didn't force myself to play every single one of them, just because I didn't want to. And I'm sure I missed some really good side quests at the end of the game. But now, moving on to the very last thing that I think this game was really lacking in, that gave it, just short of the GOTY, and that is Ultima being a vague villain. We learned about Ultima, at the same time that we lost Cid, and Cid is like, I know who you are, and stabs Ultima, and some crazy stuff happens that's a little confusing. And then it seems that, well, Cid was the only person alive who knew who he was. And after that, it was just this giant mystery. And it's okay to have mysteries in games, but when your main villain is a mystery throughout most of the game, it's hard to understand. It's hard to fear them or care about them when we don't know what's going on. And it doesn't even have to be the truth. We could have learned a lie about Ultima, which would have led to a twist at the end of the game, like, oh no, this is what he's going to do. And I didn't fear him by the end of the game. I just was tired of him. There were a lot of false promises made and false threats made, honestly, after the Bahamut fight. And that's another thing. I feared Benedicta. I feared Hugo. I feared Ultima at first, and I feared Barnabas at first. But then as their promises became empty, saying that they were going to have to cleanse the vessel or tear his humanity away, I kept waiting for something horrible to happen, and it never did. In fact, I felt invincible because Barnabas wasn't allowed to kill me, and Ultima needed me, so I knew that I was going to survive till the end of the game. And I wholly expected another character to die, but it's like they put the kids' gloves on after the Bahamut fight, and yeah, someone else needed to die to make me fear Ultima, even though he was very powerful and sent, armies across the world to kill lots of people. He didn't kill anybody I cared about, and I think that's where he was lacking, and also his motivation. I didn't fully understand what his motivation was for using Clive as a vessel. I just knew that he wanted Clive as a vessel. And that's it. So, yeah, there you go. That's it. Once again, I still really enjoyed my time with Final Fantasy XVI. I'm glad I played it. I will probably play the DLC eventually, but I'm going to move on to some other games here soon that you will see on the FailroadExpress as well. So, I hope you liked this review. If you're thinking, you know, should I play Final Fantasy XVI or not, it's absolutely worth a shot. Once again, the greatest things about this game are the mature storylines, the world building, the voice actors, and of course Cid, Telemon, the best Cid in Final Fantasy. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll check you guys next time.